Okay, so yeah, hi everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I really appreciate it. I know that everybody's indoors and everything. And it's great to see a few folks like Pat Durham and John Bush, I've never met, who knows a lot about this subject. And yeah, just looking forward to talking for about 30 minutes. As you can see, I'm coming live from the ballroom at the Hambone Kelly's on San Pablo Avenue. The musicians aren't here yet. As you know, the jazz musicians, 3 o'clock in the afternoon is a little early for them. All joking aside, you can see this is the Hambone Kelly's was a pretty swanky place. It was a very wonderful venue for traditional jazz and a big venue. And so today I just want to kind of briefly go through it, what the experience was. Really, it's very significant historically, internationally, because it was very important to the revival of traditional jazz, what we think of as New Orleans jazz from the early days of Storyville, early 20th century. And the other thing that's remarkable about it is it was run as a co-op. It was a cooperative nightclub, which I'm not an expert on nightclubs, but that's pretty unusual, as we'll see. But it was really a scene, and it must have been a wonderful place. And I think, I hope you guys, maybe you have heard of it, maybe you know nothing about it, but in 30 minutes or so, I hope to, run us through the history of the club, and also here's some music. So I'm going to switch now to my, the PowerPoint. Oop. That's a little bit too far ahead. That blows one of my surprises, but we'll get to that. This is a very quick run through, right? Yeah, so I'm calling it a co-op nightclub, Lou Waters' Great Experiment, which was to run it as a cooperative. As you can see, there's Lou Waters, cornet player extraordinaire, larger than life figure, and his club, which was, I shouldn't say just his club, but he was really the founder, the kind of guiding force behind it. Yeah, so there's our central figure, and it really, the story begins and ends as well with Lou Waters. He was born in Santa Cruz. He grew up mainly in Rio Vista, which is about 40 minutes from Vallejo. And he was sent to a military school for elementary school and junior high school. And that's where he became a musician. He was a member of the fife and drum corps, and he picked up the cornet, and he had an immense talent for it. He's a very smart guy, but really his attention became music. He started writing his own arrangements for the band and orchestra at the school in his early teens, and won a scholarship to study at the University of San Francisco. So he really had an extraordinary talent at a very young age. When he went to USF, though, pretty soon he wasn't interested in doing academic studies in music. He went on he played on a cruise ship one summer and went professional. So I'll just show you, there's a couple of pictures. These were the bands he played for, and these were dance orchestras. Lou was born in 1911, so we're talking about the end of the 1920s. By then, swing had come to the fore. The big band sound had really, in the 30s and 40s, it'll completely take over what we think of as jazz, as in the form of dance music. And that's where Lou got his start. I think hopefully you can see, maybe you can see my cursor as well. That's Lou. He's only 18 years old, and he's playing in these pretty important orchestras. When he was in his 20s, he was playing for the Carol Loeffner, that's the band on the right. They were backup for Bing Crosby for a considerable time. And they had another very important musician, Phil Harris, was in the band. And even at this age, Lou was starting to do arrangements for these orchestras. So really, his career looked very bright at a very early age, kind of this wunderkind guy. Now, it even got better. By the end of the 30s, or at least, as we'll see, in a traditional sense, it seemed like the sky was the limit for Lou. There he is he became the band leader for Sweet's Ballroom, which was in Oakland. And as you can see from this lower photograph, this is a major venue. Not only did they pack the houses with hundreds of dancers, but as you can see, major orchestras would come through, like Count Basie and Duke Ellington, and play there. And this is the late 30s. And Lou became the house band leader. Again, he's only in his late 20s. So at this point, you would think, hey, this guy is going somewhere. He's going to be a major figure. But, and he was. And certainly in the Bay Area, he's at the peak of the top, the creme de la creme. But for Lou, he didn't like this kind of music. He was bored by it. He was disgusted with it. Basically, it was a gig. It was a solid gig, no doubt, but it was dance tunes every night. And they had to play Pop 40. He was given a list at Sweets. He had to play a certain number of foxtrots, a certain number of waltzes, a certain number of Pop 40 tunes. And he didn't care for this music. His real love was New Orleans jazz. Those earlier bands that I showed you, Carol Loeffner and the early bands, he was on tour and he would tour the country, Lou did. And he loved New Orleans when he went to New Orleans. And he found out the older players, by this time these are an older generation of jazzers, the original jazz players, African-American musicians living in New Orleans. And he would informally jam with them, and he loved their music, and he learned from them. And that's where his love was. And he explains why, but I'll just, the key figures for that age, he didn't meet, I don't think he met King Oliver or Louis Armstrong, but certainly that scene is where he found his real love in music. But the sound was definitely, this is the King Oliver band. As you can see, there's King Oliver and a very young Louis Armstrong, okay? But keep in mind this type of band, banjo, piano, and different horns. The other important figure in Storyville at the time was a piano player, the great Jelly Roll Morton, who also was in New Orleans. And again, not at the time that Lou was there. Lou was there like 15 years after the heyday of Storyville. But that was the music he discovered and loved. And when he would go to New Orleans, whoever was still there, the kind of older players, many of them long forgotten by the larger music world, but definitely respected figures in the origins of jazz. So this was Lou's heart and soul musically. And I just, he is very eloquent on his feelings about jazz. He's been interviewed. He said to him, and not everybody defines jazz this way or music this way. He says the beauty of jazz is the wildness of it. This is what attracted him. The surprise of jazz, that's what got me. There might be an incident when a band is playing and everyone is gassed and someone comes in with some really weird, wild notes, and I would go with that. So he's talking, everybody has their own personal take on music. This was what attracted to him. And of course, in the big band orchestras, you didn't have this. You didn't have any chance to do this. You were given a script and you played it night after night. Okay, so waters broke. He started playing these, King Oliver and Jelly Roll Morton songs and arrangements at Sweet's Ballroom. It got him fired. They fired him. They said, "You're playing jazz. they even called it that, as opposed to swing or dance music, which of course had its origins in jazz. He said he left. He says, "Don't ask me why. I just made up my mind that I wasn't going to work with large dance bands anymore. I said, I'll either get out of music altogether or I'll have a small band, period." And you can see this is kind of what his dream will be, in which he was able to realize, okay? Now, next to him is another major figure in the revival of traditional jazz, also a Californian named Turk Murphy. You can see this is one of their earliest days together. They met, and Murphy also was having a similar experience. There he is he was in a pop band orchestra. Look, everybody's in a tuxedo. There he is on the far right there with the band here. And he's also discussed it. He's a trombone player and he's sick of this. So what happened was Lou was finding kindred spirits in all the gigs and places in the Bay Area, okay? Fellow, people had found something much more interesting to them. So just to keep in mind, this is what these guys would look like. They'd be in these penguin suits, right? Well, this is how they really looked like. Yes. I love this picture because it's out of the uniform, out of the big band. This is a picture from when they made some of their first studio recordings together. But this is 1942. It looks like something out of Jack Kerouac, On the Road. That's how they felt. They were rebelling from the music world that they were in. And so what do? You start to try to create this music. Now, they were finding other folks and putting together in sort of jam sessions. They would do their regular gigs in the big band concerts, and then after hours they would start to play together. And they found different folks. I won't go through everybody. These are all what would become the Yerba Buena Jazz Band. But I just want to point out they're all basically born the same time. And Wally Rose, the pianist, was from Oakland. Bob Scobie, the second trumpet player for what would be the band, from New Mexico, but a Western guy, born about the same time. Bob Helm, a clarinetist, also another Californian near Fresno. Bill Dart from here in San Francisco, the drummer. I just want to point out a couple of things here. I'll stop here. If you guys play drums, you might find some unusual things, or even if you've just watched concerts. This is a wood block that he played. This is a cowbell he played. And this is what he called a tom-tom. So they're putting together, not only trying to recreate this music, but they also had to figure out how to, the instrumentation of it. So he played he was a very skilled drummer. And again, if you look at old photographs of the New Orleans bands, you'd see similar drum kits. So again, same age, Bay Area guy. These guys a little bit older, but only a couple years older than Lou. Banjo and tuba. Playing. There's no bass, stand-up bass. That play the tuba, play the bass part. So getting the band together, and then of course Turk Murphy, near Chico, but also about the same age. So we're talking about really a West Coast group of musicians, all about the same generation, Californians mainly. They're all 20 years or so older than the originators of jazz, who were, from New Orleans and that area, and African Americans. So it's a very interesting. What they're trying to do is put together this music, which again, swing music has completely overwhelmed, and it's almost disappeared. So looking again at how do you do this? because this music is not played on the radio anymore. It was very early days of recording, so there's very few recordings of the music. Today, with the internet, we can easily go and find in minutes recordings of anything King Oliver did. But that's not true in the late 1930s. You either found out the players and heard them perform, or you found any kind of recordings, any records, 78 records left. And it's funny, a lot of these musicians, they're musicians, Lou Waters and Turk Murphy, but they were also avid record collectors, because that's how they could figure out, how is this music, this great music they love, performed. And, by this time, a lot of, even King Oliver's not performing anymore. A lot of these people have passed away, they couldn't make a career out of it. Louis Armstrong was one of the few that actually made it into, a great career for decades to come. But a lot of other folks, they were still in New Orleans. Some had to go back to day jobs. So this is what they're putting together. And where would they perform? Well, it's very funny. This tavern was way up in the Oakland Hills. Sorry. Lou found this place, and look, they literally would play. There were stables nearby, but they would gather together, and they're starting to form the basis of a band. The big leap, though, was when they found an old speakeasy, a former speakeasy in San Francisco, near the Palace Hotel, so kind of downtown, but a little dive place. And they became part of this hot music society. That's a lot of these people were collectors as well as performers. And they formed the Yerba Buena Jazz Band. So this is like 1940, 41. And they create a sensation. On the eve of World War II, they have a weekly radio program. Often it's broadcast nationally. They have a wild, enthusiastic following. It turns out people love to come and hear the music. And the atmosphere. So they're really doing great things right on the eve of the war. World War II comes, they get inducted, mainly as musicians. This is Lou Waters in a band he formed when he was in the Navy. Bob Helm was in the Battle of the Bulge. He was in the band and also Turk Murphy. So all of them had to serve. World War II. In World War II, after the war, they'd have to get the band back together, and they did. They started performing, and the enthusiasm just was even more than before. The only problem was they got kicked out of their venue. The Don Club folded as a venue, and they actually had to get through bankruptcy and tax problems and legal things to get the band all together again. So the question is, and now this is where we get into El Cerrito, where are they going to perform? And they find our town. Yes, it's El Cerrito, but back in the day, El Cerrito had quite a reputation. I think a lot of people might be familiar with this. We've done a few things, but El Cerrito was just over, as you guys know, over the border into Contra Costa County, and was a wide open town, basically. Gambling, even prostitution, strip clubs, but and alcohol. And it was, and this had been going on for a while. Now we're in, everybody's come back from World War II, but this has been going on a while. Mainly, all of this got started during Prohibition. Because El Cerrito was unincorporated, a large section of it, we ended up having sort of a downtown area filled with that bootleggers took advantage of. There were connections to Reno. I love this quote. This is one of the band members of Creedence Clearwater Revival, actually. He was told that back during Prohibition, when everything took off in El Cerrito, he said, you could tell cars driving up and down San Pablo Avenue with their rear end dragging on the ground. You knew the trunk was full of booze. I mean, this is our fair city, right down the main street. And the other big fact here, of course, is there's no police department until 1927. So Prohibition started 8 years before, and we haven't had a police department during all that time. What we did have, of course, was a racetrack. We had a dog racing track, heavy gambling, heavy connections, a lot of bookmaking and connections all across the country. This was also part of El Cerrito. There's a quote where thousands of people left millions of dollars with the puppies. So yeah, if you're unfamiliar with this is a fascinating story. I can't get into it. Chris Treadway is really working on this. But suffice to say, let me just give you one more statistic. I love this. So that war ends in 1945. Look at this. This comes from the directory, the phone directory. In El Cerrito in 1945, there were 22 liquor taverns, 7 poker clubs, and just 4 churches. So the police department is still kind of in a fledgling state, and religion obviously hasn't hit town too hard. Well, for some people, this might not look like a good place to start a business or cooperative business. Lou loved it. And we don't know exactly the story, but somehow he found out that one club, a huge nightclub during World War II, was folded, was empty. It was owned, it had gone through a couple forms, but most recently it was a burlesque club run by Sally Rand, who was a very famous nude dancer. She'd become famous for her fan dance. You can kind of see the picture there at the Chicago World's Fair in 1933, and then moved to the Bay Area for the Golden Gate Exposition of 39 and 40. She opened a club during World War II called Sally Rand's. It was a big windowless blockhouse. And again, so as the war ended, the war, as you know, the Kaiser plants and things, war workers went, were no longer coming down San Pablo Avenue as much. So the club folded, but the building remained. So Lou looked at that somehow, we don't know the full story, and it was perfect. He loved it. Not only for the kind of its heritage, but also how much it was like Storyville, the New Orleans red light district that King Oliver and Louis Armstrong came out of. This is the closest thing in the Bay Area to that scene that you could find. And so he and the other members pulled their money together. They formed a cooperative. They each put down $1,250 of their savings, which was a lot back then, for each member, took over ownership of this building. And you can see, this isn't the exact same view, it's from the other side, but you can see they even kept the awning, the Hollywood Club awning, and opened. And you can see those hours, 2 to 2 a.m. And they started at work. Now, it took a while to open it took a few months to get the place in order. And they did it, again, as a co-op. I want to show you the floor plan, okay? So this is the location. This is where Wells Fargo Bank and the Macaroni Grill are now. Too bad, huh? I mean, no offense, but I would have liked this more. But anyway, you can see the clarinetist Bob Helm years later drew up from memory, the map and floor plan. You can see here's the creek, Wildcat Creek. Here's San Pablo Ave. And here's the borderline. That's Alameda County. And this is unincorporated Contra Costa County. It was a huge building. But they wanted to, it would be run as a co-op. Now, not just as a business, but also as a place where they can live. If you look at the map, and I'll do something, we'll get closer, but some of these rooms are designated living quarters. There was a second floor, and once COVID lifts, I can get the other portion of this because it's not available online, but Stanford Archive has it. But a large portion of the rooms would be studio apartments. The band members would live there. They would also cook the meals, this giant kitchen, this outdoor barbecue, smoke oven, okay? And of course, they perform. Now, just looking at the floor plan, this is not a concert hall, okay? The central feature is the dance floor. Yes, it's jazz, but it's not concert hall jazz. It was meant, they were the house band, and it was for dancing. Dancing, okay? And drinking, you can see, that's they installed a 100-foot long bar, okay? They installed the dance floor that could have 400 people on it. And of course, they played music, often 5 nights a week when they started. So this is a huge undertaking. But the idea was we'd live there, we'd make a living there, and in Lou's mind, we'd be free of the market. We'd be free, we'd be able to be artists and music and be free of all the commercial things that had turned jazz into swing band dance music, right? And they also were going to have a really good time. Now, the other part about this, if you look, you can't see, on the back of this wall are the names of songs, and there's about 100 songs on the wall. Those were the songs that the band would play. People could call them out and hear them, or they'd be noted. That's why, since so much it was instrumental, but they were doing sort of education as well as performing. They often would have washboards or jugs on the stage. People could come up and play them, right? But the idea was, it's not just simply, we're going to play music we love. We're going to show people, they would do dance lessons. They would show older movies, silent films. And it's really a big effort here. It's a real concept, I think. Oh, just one last room. And this, we don't have pictures of the residence, the studio apartments, but this kind of gives you a feeling. In the back lounge, after hours or before hours, I guess, it was their living room, right? That's the clarinetist and his wife, Bob Helm and Kay Helm, and that's Lou Waters' wife, Pat, his first wife, Pat Waters. So yeah. And of course, there's eating. And, not fine cuisine, but they made sure that there were specialties, especially they made to as much of New Orleans they could get, sort of New Orleans, sorry, NOLA barbecue and fried chicken, right? Plus other things. The prices are good, right? You get it a la carte. Lou was in charge of the kitchen. It's said that he frequently would jump onto the stage and he'd still be wearing his apron because he'd be running the kitchen, or that he would carry out a hamburger or a plate of spaghetti, lay it on, give the order to a table, and then go up on stage and start playing. So it must have been quite a scene, right? So basically, they put sweat equity. They rebuilt the kitchen. The members of the band, Turk Murphy had carpentry skills. He laid the dance floor, and each person, Bob Helm, would run the bar. Okay, so it finally opens. It's not really clear who Hambone Kelly was. Lou would say that he was a vaudeville performer. They had a painting that was popular, but it was just, it was like the idea of what Hambone Kelly would be, sort of this lovable philosopher bum. So they had that painting on the back of the bar. But yeah, they opened up finally. And it was a huge, oh, damn. It was a huge success. Hundreds of people were coming in, and it really provided something really different, a really fun atmosphere to go out in the Bay Area in the late 40s. I've blown it a couple times, but it was really popular among college students, old-time jazzers, of course, couples looking for dinner and dancing. And also this young man, who I've blown it a couple times, if you guys have been, this young man also went there underage. His name was Clint Eastwood. He was a high school student sneaking in. He couldn't order drinks, but he could stand in the back. If you know, Clint Eastwood grew up in Oakland, but he's a huge jazz fan. He made a movie about Charlie Parker many years ago. But yeah, I'd stand in the back to hear Lou Waters and Turk Murphy. Okay, so the big thing, of course, is the music. And, you know, I'm probably about 10 minutes from finishing. Sorry, I'm taking a little longer. The music. And Lou Waters, again, this is, people have different, they define what music means to them, but what was he trying to do? And he says, jazz is created by the communication between band and audience. The mood of people who are dancing and listening is taken in by the musicians and then fed out again, back and forth. Okay? So again, this is not concert hall. He's not avant-garde, you know, it's meant to have fun. It's to dance, but like, for instance, he didn't like to do studio recordings. He always wanted to record live, hopefully with a dance audience, because that's where the energy and that's where how he really felt the music jazz is all about. And you can see it's a great photo from Hambone Kelly's. Turk Murphy in the back there with the jug he's playing. Okay, now remember I was saying Jazz 101. Well, something very critical to what and important for El Cerrito is that, and for the club, was to bring in as many of the originators of jazz, the New Orleans or early Chicago or New York figures, and have them play live, headline. And among them were people who played with Louis Armstrong or were in the early days, the originators of the jazz form. And you know, they revered these figures. And what's really important is a lot of them were not known at all anymore, but they would be brought in. They were headliners for the show, for the shows when they'd come in and play with the band, the house band. Among them were Kid Ory, the New Orleans guy who played with Louis Armstrong back in the day, and so many others. James P. Johnson, originator of stride piano. I mean, I'm not going to go through each of these. I didn't really know of them either, so I started looking them up. But these are sort of major figures that you might not know among the pantheon of, you know, Miles Davis and Charles Mingus and Duke Ellington. But yeah, that's the folks that they would bring in and, you know, were really honored to play with. Mutt Carey, another New Orleans guy. Bunk Johnson, also New Orleans. And I'm showing a couple of these. You can see Lou in the background there playing, and Bill Dart, the drum player. Also, Bunk Johnson playing with the Yerba Buena Band. Bringing these guys to El Cerrito to play. Darnell Howard, you know, these are Albert Nicholas. These are all major. You might not know my name. I didn't, but you know, within the major creators of the jazz form, and still playing. And they were brought into El Cerrito to play at this club. So, you know, I think there's quite a statement being made here about not just the music and reviving jazz. Lou Waters was not a preservationist. He wanted the music to be alive. He did his own arrangements. Some people would criticize him and the band for not being pure to the form, but that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to keep it going, to innovate, and also just show what a great way of human expression this what had been taken over by more commercial music. I want to play, and I hope this works. I want to play a section of a song. This was recorded live at Hambone Kelly's. It's a song from the 1920s called Sister Kate, and it's great musically, but it's also, I think, it shows kind of, in a way, culturally, the country became more conservative in a lot of ways after the 50s and was a lot more lively. And this, again, this is part of the attraction for Waters. It's not just the music, but the freedom of the songs as well. So hopefully this will work. I'm just going to play about, I think this is about 2 minutes of a segment from Sister Kate, and the vocalist is Turk Murphy. So hopefully everybody can hear and enjoy. Okay, you know, that song has been covered by the Beatles, by David Bowie, by Anne Margaret. I mean, but aside from that, it's been covered hundreds of times. But you know, it's for the 50s. It's a racy song. You know, the shimmy, moving like jelly. There's clearly. I don't think I need to spell it out. There's a lot going on there beyond the words. And, you know, I'm picking a slower song. Obviously, not all the songs were, you know, a lot of it was really fast-paced, brassy, raucous music. But just to get a feel for what, even though they're reviving these songs, they, you know, carry a kind of a new weight in meaning in the late 40s and 50s. Yeah, Blue Waters would say, you know, we had this wild ass recklessness. We played 1,000 tunes and never got bored. We played and made over all kinds. We played and made over all kinds of songs into our own image. Some of it was pretty good. Some of it was just awful, you know. But that wasn't the point, to be perfect, you know. Well, the place would close. The last performance was on New Year's Eve. There were a lot of reasons. New Year's Eve 1950 was the last performance. There are a lot of reasons. One was, well, the City of Cerrito was cleaning up. There's a lot of the casinos and clubs and strip joints were being removed, closing down. The city was becoming the residential suburb we know today. Another reason is that it was not somehow, even though they're packing, at least through the first few years, they were open for 3.5 years. They never really seemed to make much profit. And so that made for tension with the band members. Some, Turk Murphy and Bob Scobie, broke off to form their own bands. Some never liked the co-op idea to begin with. And Lou was not the greatest accountant. So, you know, one of the band members called it the largest house party in history. Well, that meant a lot of comped drinks and comped meals. You can see this photograph is from the end of the club. And they were trying all kinds of things by the end. But you can see it was pretty active. Of course, there's the borderline from Contra Costa. So there's a lot of things. Musically, there were differences among the band members. I'm kind of glossing over all that. But the place closed. Lou left music completely. He's only 39 years old. He was done. He got rid of his trumpet. He said, "I kept the mouthpiece so I'd never be tempted again." That was his only souvenir. He moved to Cotati outside of Santa Rosa, built his own home, worked as a cook for his hospital in Santa Rosa, and really didn't perform again. He just came out of retirement in 1963 for protest concerts to protest the building of a nuclear power plant in Bodega Bay. So there's an album of those performances. But he was done with music. He was also a carpenter and a skilled geologist. There's actually a mineral named after him called watersite. So very fascinating, interesting guy. He became what people considered a kind of a guru or philosopher of jazz up at his cabin, but he wouldn't perform anymore. You know, this was a labor of love. Clearly, he wanted to create a place where the musicians could live, perform, and revitalize a great form of music that had disappeared. And in that way, his legacy did work out. It did create an interest in traditional jazz that's you know, has remained steady ever since these days. So really interesting guy. I hope. Sorry, I took a little longer than expected, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. You know, maybe if there's more questions, I even have some more music. But I think probably this is a good time to open it up for questions or any memories or comments folks have. And how do I get? I'm gonna stop my share, right?
Well, Chris, that was great. I think it was a great talk.
Thanks.
So anybody with questions or comments, just unmute yourself and let them fly.
If you don't unmute yourself, there's a little
I did.
microphone.
I was wondering about hello?
We
Yes.
hear you fine.
You know, there was a drawing of the building that they had where the plaza is now. I was wondering what was the relationship of that building to the old adobe that was there, I believe was still there at the time.
Yeah, when Sally Rand and Lou Waters operated their clubs, there was still the Rancho, but it was further up on San Pablo, just really kind of across the street from them, or within throwing distance. And at that time, the Rancho was run as a major casino through the 30s and 40s. I'm not sure the timing. I know when the rancho was sort of burned down, but I'm not sure exactly when they tore down the building where Hambone Kelly's was. But yeah, they were right next to each other. The rancho, which was run as a casino at the time, and the you know, Hambone Kelly's. Chris Treadway probably has the timing of that, but I know, I'm not sure when they, you know, at the time when they were both operating, they were side by side.
Side by side, on the east side of San Pablo, east
Right.
side of San
Right.
Pablo, right? Side
Mm.
by side.
So
You
kind
know,
of where the beginnings of the El Cerrito Plaza is now, those stores.
Yeah, I just couldn't tell from your drawing, you know, that you had shown. So
Mm.
that's very interesting. I'm sorry I never saw any of that because I didn't move to El Cerrito until until about 1969, much later.
Mm. Great. Yeah.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Somebody else has got a hand up there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, just go right ahead. Can you?
Do I just talk? All right.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
of the records that's available, or one of the recordings, is called "Doing the Hambone," and there was, in fact, a dance, jazz dance that people would do at the Hambone Kelly's place. They would even have contests with people doing the Hambone.
Yeah, it's, if I was more, if, you know, ideally, I'd like to do this as a presentation with live, you know, when COVID is over, with live music, hopefully some good barbecue, and to have people demonstrate the shimmy and of course the Hambone, which is a really, like, you're slapping your leg and your hands and cupping hands, and it's yeah, pretty you know, everything was lively, you know, and participatory in the club, so they definitely were doing that. Thanks for reminding me. Sorry, I didn't mention it.
So the ham bone was the upper part of the leg?
I don't know if I don't know that my dad was a doctor and he never liked the song "The Leg Bone's Connected to the Ankle Bone," so I don't want to go there. But yeah, I don't know where the Hambone was a dance. The character of Hambone Kelly, Lou said, was an old vaudeville performer. So I don't know if Hambone has still other meanings. Yeah, maybe somebody knows.
Hey,
So I
Chris,
did,
Chris,
yeah.
this is John Basher. When I was looking up
Oh,
the
John.
information for that article, there were a couple. They may be folklore, but one is that when Lou Waters and Company went into the club, that apparently Sally Rand's group had just walked out and left plates of food on the tables.
Yeah.
You know, empty, dirty glasses on the thing. But they also said that the what you called the living quarters were they had this leopard print wallpaper and carpeting there, and that's where some of the other dancers would retire to later in the evening.
Yeah.
Perhaps
No,
with
all, yeah, that, I think a lot of, there's some taped interviews with members of the band. I think we really owe a lot to the clarinetist Bob Helm. And he is, sorry, in other words, you're exactly right. And it's not apocryphal either. There were, even though the place was closed several months, it still had even like uneaten food on the plates, as John's describing. And it not only there was always the people really felt that it was probably the back rooms were being used for prostitution. And there was even a back building that probably had illegal gambling. In addition to the wallpaper and carpet, like John's saying, there was the frescoes on the ceiling, which you can't really see from the few photographs that are left. But, you know, Lou did not want any of that removed. That had to stay. because it, was the atmosphere. I put it so much as being reflecting the Storyville, which was the red light district of New Orleans. But Lou was just as interested, and he knew a lot about the Barbary Coast and the clubs of the Barbary Coast and the music scene there. And also the Chicago's South Side, where the Great Migration folks went. If you've watched the movie version of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Lou would have been all over that, because not only is it capturing the diaspora of jazz music out of New Orleans, but also the recording industry and what it was doing to people, the white-owned record companies. So, I don't know if I'm given the impression maybe that he's out for a good time or something, but he was really kind of an intellectual and a historian. He knew so when he talked about people like Louis Armstrong, it was not, like the guy was a saint, but he was, he viewed Armstrong as a composer and an intellectual. And, in addition to being a fantastic musician. Yeah. So, we talk a lot about today about cultural appropriation, and Waters didn't, he's back in the 30s and 40s, he didn't have that language, but I'm sure, from everything he did, from creating a cooperative to, trying to educate the public, and of course, he's not making any money. He created his own record label mainly to get the music out and to have recordings of it. So it's, very interesting on all kinds of levels. I'm sorry, John, I really learned a lot from your article. So, but yeah, everything John was saying is documented. Yeah.
Great talk, Chris.
So to what extent was the audience integrated?
That's, that, I'm kind of new to the research. The San Francisco, Stanford has a San Francisco jazz archive that's devoted to traditional jazz, especially in the Bay Area. And, there's a whole video on the club, and there's people that would know it. And unfortunately, from photographs, as you saw, I used almost all the photographs that are of the club. So there's very few. So I think it would have to go from people that would have to learn from people who are actually there. I don't think it will. I mean, it's integrated, and certainly, but whether that music attracted young African American audiences, I don't know. I know it was huge among the college crowd. He played at the Big Bear Tavern, and Lou created a song called The Big Bear Stomp, which everybody thought was for the Cal Bears. But it was, so there was this, there was jazzers, there's sort of, suburban couples that are coming, and there's this huge college. And, now in the case of Clint Eastwood, he remembers in interviews, he said that it was a mixed audience. But I don't, unfortunately, what I'd like is to invite Clint. I don't agree with Clint's politics so much, maybe, but on jazz, and he's a historian, maybe we can get him to come. But he could tell us, because he was there, and he went a lot. It was one of the few places that you could, as an underage person, you could sneak in and hear the jazz, and as long as you didn't try to order any drinks, alcohol, you could hear the music. So my inclination is to think that no, it didn't attract, I think it was mainly a white audience, but I don't know for sure, but that would be my impression. Yeah, so, and again, but they devoted so much time to educate, makes think that it wasn't, it was probably younger audiences that are learning about this this form of jazz, form of music.
Chris, I don't know if we need to go as far as Clint Eastwood. I think there's still a number of people around town who were in there.
Oh,
We
but
just need to look for them.
Hey, listen,
And
we could
also
pack
about
in the. I want a packed audience. 500
Yeah.
people, just like at the
Yeah.
club.
Yeah.
Aim high.
About the financial problems. I'm like, there used to be a famous place called Louis Club here, and I was very fortunate to be able to speak to both Louis Nicoli, who ran it, and he ran it with his brother Lou Favero, and they was like, man, employee theft was an enormous problem for them. Like if there wasn't somebody there watching all the time, and everything from meat to ashtrays to anything, it was walking out the door.
Yeah, I haven't heard like that kind of comment, but more that people would invite their friends and relatives, and everybody would be enjoying in the party. People were being charged. They were able to keep it running for 3.5 years. There's a very funny story toward the end where there was a robbery at the club, and the police got a call at 10 in the morning. This is like in the last 6 months of the club. And the robber called the police and said, I just held up Hambone Kelly's, and there's 3 guys in there in the freezer. You better come over there and get them. And the police came over, and Lou Waters was in the freezer. He was in his bathrobe. The robber got him out of bed and made him open the safe. Fortunately, the safe was already open because his wife only knew the code. And there's pictures of Lou there in his bathrobe coming out of the freezer. And the guy made off with $2,500. So I don't think that might have been the death knell, but they were definitely hurting back then. I'm sure you're right, Tom. One thing, Lou suffered from a hernia, like in 1948. That's why he's playing the washboard there. Tremendous strain on him. But again, the labor of love. Sorry,
No question. So since this was a co-op model, and we know that it only lasted 3.5 years, do we know kind of what happened as the business disillusion happened with the business partners? I had friends maybe 8 or 10 years ago try to start one of the first co-op bars in Oakland, and it ended up being kind of a failure to launch. But it's one of those things where it'd be interesting to learn the lessons of what happened when there were these kinds of businesses.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that we usually think of the post-war era as all prosperity and big thin cars and everything, but this is first of all, people had just gone through all the war and the rationing of the war, and they'd gone through the Great Depression. So in 1947, there was no guarantee any prosperity like what did happen was going to happen. So I think, one thing I didn't bring up was the idea is to form a cooperative is not just, hey, it's fun, let's form a cooperative, but look, housing was a tremendous crisis in the late 40s. You would have a home as well as a livelihood and income, and you wouldn't be on the road all the time. There was a lot of other aspects to it. I'm sorry, I'm coming back to, so I don't really know I don't have more specifics, Tessa, than what I've said. But yeah, I think it was for like 2.5 years, they were literally bringing in hundreds of people a night and maybe 1,000 people on a weekend. So some people have said, if it was a little tighter business model, it was a huge place, probably too big for what they could run. It could have ended up more like the Cheese Board Collective than, but I don't know I think at Stanford, the archive, once it's open, there may be those kinds of materials. I know there's menus and things like that, but you can kind of track it. I guess I'm not really answering your question. But they really did make a good go of it. And for the first 2 years, he was even running a record label and signing artists from the period. And, it was really thought of as sort of, he was creating this sort of alternative economic model. And El Cerrito had co-op, which is still around today. It's 80 years, 80-year history. And there were even co-op, maybe folks remember the co-op stores that were here. So
Okay, well, we've been going on for a while now. It's been a great talk. We've had some great questions. Why don't we have one last question, if there is one, or
I was
otherwise?
trying to figure out a timeline here. The club closed on New Year's Day, 1951. When did the adjacent Rancho close? What year? And when did that dog track go away?
Well, the dog track closed in 1939.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know when the Rancho closed. If Chris Sterba was here, he can answer it like that, but he ain't.
Hello, Mr. Chris. Hello, Dave. This is Pat Durham.
Hey, Pat, our brand new board member. How you doing?
Hi. I'm good. What a wonderful presentation. A great presentation. I can't help but to think about what I say about dreams, because dreams become thoughts and thoughts become reality and reality becomes our history. And I'm thinking about the El Cerrito High School Jazz Band. I'm not so sure how many people are familiar with them, but they are very popular. I have gone across this state and ran into performances by the El Cerrito High School Jazz Band. I've gone to the Monterey Jazz Festival. I have seen them at Yoshi's. They have performed all over, and I'm just very, very happy to learn the history of El Cerrito and this music history, jazz, that I think our children at El Cerrito High School need to know this information.
yeah.
I'm just sharing.
Yeah. Sorry, I got cut off. I'm actually on my wife's computer now.
Okay.
Yeah, Pat, we are blessed by having an excellent jazz program and musical director at the high school.
Yes.
And I would love, my idea, if there was no COVID, the idea was to, partner with them. And, before COVID, I was talking to him about the students playing in restaurants.
Yes.
Getting out and whether, in small groups, they're incredibly talented. And
They are very good.
And the high school has hosted festivals, obviously not now, but we're bringing big names and top high schools from around the state.
Yes.
They were doing it every October. So no, Pat's right on the money. I'd love to work with them. My daughter's at the high school now. She's not performing with them, but the reputation, she tells me so, of the director.
Yes, El Cerrito High School Jazz Band is very, very popular. And I think that you would enjoy being a part of their ministry.
Yeah.
Just sharing.
I'd like to say that Chris Sterba has actually put on several concerts. I guess when you were with the, what do you call it, the Arts Commission, because there was a great concert you put on several years ago with the whole history of music in El Cerrito with a different band, starting back with the California days, going through blues. It was tremendous. And to have maybe a Hambone Kelly's Blue Waters, maybe we could get the high school. I think you had suggested maybe doing that. And yeah, that'd be great. Oh, and by the way, I want to just recognize that we have a member of our city council with us, Tessa Rudnick. It's great to see our city leaders turning up at these events. And Chris Treadway, I think, has joined us too.
So sorry, Tessa, I don't know where I got cut off, but yeah, I'd love to learn. Hopefully, I'll learn more. And yeah, I'm sorry for your friend's attempt in Oakland.
It was actually a really interesting story. It was a friend of mine who was at the time the executive director for the United Federation of Co-op Workers, and she was noticing how there, it's all these different. It was the 2010, 2011, when there was really a lot more groundswell around creating these in the East Bay. It seems to have kind of gone away overall. It seems that it's more people taking on their own micro businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like after it made a lot of sense after World War II. And of course, the other big surge was the late 60s and early 70s, where people were creating food co-ops, which are, that's another one right here in El Cerrito is very successful, the El Cerrito Natural Foods. I never get the name right, but it's outside Pablo Ave there. So there is a tradition. A lot of it, there was so much stress after World War II, and the population boomed so much, and people are finding it's not only the economy but also the social aspect of finding community. My wife and I and my daughter was at El Cerrito Preschool Cooperative, and we moved here in 2001. We didn't know anybody. And, you make in that case, it's not only the kids going to school, but you participate, you help watch the kids. And we've maintained those friendships all through today. It's really a beautiful, it's much more than just economics, and different in each case. But yeah, no, I just, agreeing, adding to what you're saying. Yeah.
Does anybody know if you can still buy Lou Waters albums at Down Home Music?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
I just did. I bought a couple of CDs, and actually the Lou Waters label was called Down Home Records.
I noticed.
Now the store is Down Home Music on San Pablo Ave.
Yeah.
But the record label is our Huli, which Chris Sterba started. And that was his effort to preserve all kinds of roots music all over the country. So like Pat was saying, we actually have a very rich and ongoing musical culture here in the city.
I heard the high school jazz band play on the 4th of July one time. It just blew me away. They are just incredible. At that age, just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, let me go back to my suggestion that we have one more question. If people think I'm trying to close this down too soon, let me know. But I always like to close out when people are still having fun. Does somebody have one really cool question? Yeah, I just like to add, for years, I think some of the same people who played with Lou Waters used to play at the Point in Point Richmond, the place which is now the Down and Under. And like the Bay Area and Sacramento has that traditional jazz festival. Do they still do that? I mean, I think what Lou Waters and those guys did was really help turn the Bay Area into a center for a resurgence in, traditional New Orleans jazz, which I believe is still going on.
Yeah. Like I said, Lou stopped playing, but Turk Murphy had a band up till the day he died, up into the 80s. And there are many other bands all over the country. This isn't my music, so it was kind of, I'm learning all this too. But these are international, I should point out that these are internationally known figures that we're talking about, Turk Murphy and Lou Waters in particular. They're known for people, people who are into the music all over the world, and that was pre-internet as well. And that thing of them going to the meeting, the musicians meeting in the 20s and 30s and going through junk shops and finding these records. That now, of course, that community is made so much more easy, but it's very much international. The other things have, there's been important moments like the movie The Sting, revived ragtime so much, and that's pretty much continued. In fact, my daughter has a recital where she's playing Pineapple Rag, so, and it's pretty good, she's rocking with it. So, yeah, definitely. But again, that could have disappeared, What did music sound like in the 1890s? I have no idea. Maybe I don't want to know. Maybe it's so boring. But could that have happened to traditional jazz or early jazz? Maybe. But it took people like Lou Waters and of course Louis Armstrong still continuing to keep it alive, and everybody knows it to this day.
So, what kind of music do you like, Chris?
Hey, this isn't about me. Oh, I have my jazz. I just about everything. No, not heavy, not thrash metal. I don't care for that, but just about everything else. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I think you're trying to speak, but you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, we'll take, oh, there we go. All right.
Oh.
A couple of months before Turk died, he was honored with a concert at Carnegie Hall. And among the bands that were playing there was a trad band from Argentina and a trad band from the south of France, who both loved him dearly. And they came up and played for a couple of days in New York City while he played. He couldn't play very much at the time, mostly washboard, but it's an international music. There's a bunch of Japanese bands. Lou Waters' arrangements are still available. He used to give them away, essentially. And so all around the world, there were bands still playing it this many years after a while, because it was, at the same time, it was tightly arranged, very nice, but then it had room for improv. In fact, when they were playing at Hambone's, sometimes the band wouldn't take a break. What would happen was one or two of the musicians would walk off to go over and get a drink or a bite to eat. Turk would play drums, Bob Helm played trumpet, a lot of people played piano. So they would just sort of move around, and by the time the Hambones ended, their band was down to 4 people. And Bill Dart's drum set consisted of a plywood sheet with 6 wooden blocks on it, which he hated. But that's what Lou Waters wanted him to play instead of playing a whole drum kit. So it gradually diminished. But as I say, they would play nonstop by just only a few of the musicians staying on the bandstand and people coming and going. And then it would be back up to its full complement and play with.
So it sounds like you were there.
I was at the Dawn Club before I was born. Before I was born, which incidentally was segregated, but that's another story. I asked the Dawn Club before the war. But my mother has told me that I enjoyed Lou Waters' band prenatally.
All right. I don't know how we can top that. Are there any more questions, or maybe we should all fade away into the distance? What do you guys think? Listen, thanks a lot for coming. We're a membership organization. Go to our website. If you're not a member, consider being one, okay? And hope to see you at more events, and look forward to the rest of the new year.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cerrito.
Hey, Paul, I didn't even notice you were here.
I just got here. I had to do
Oh, you
something.
missed the show.
Wow. I know.
Well, we recorded it. We recorded it.
Oh,
So we can post it.
okay.
It
Chris
was
still
great,
there?
Chris.
Sorry, Chris. Will it be, what website will it be on?
Well, we'll probably put it on YouTube and link it to our website.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I had I had to
No.
drive somebody somewhere. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Paul.
I'm so sorry. I looked so forward to this, and then
Don't.
this morning I said yes to a neighbor to help them out, and then I came back late. So I'm
Well, just to make you feel bad, Paul, it was fantastic.
oh good, oh good. Well, I missed that excitement in El Cerrito that Chris was probably going to talk about. So
Hello, Paul. This is Pat Durham.
Hi, Pat.
Just saying hello. Yes, it was a good presentation.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go have a glass of wine now then and drown my sorrows. So,
There you go.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. I'll check it out on the website.
Okay, I'm going to end the performance here.
Okay. Thanks again, Chris. It was great in all respects.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, John, for putting it together.
Thanks again, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you to all aboard, and see you all later.
Okay, bye-bye all.